We are used to seeing fifth-generation fighters at various airshows or in demos, but no one has observed the new generation of fighters in actual combat operations. The justifications for this are quite different, starting with the Pentagon officially restricting the F-35 from flying at supersonic speeds starting in 2020 due to imminent airframe failure, and ending with the decommissioning of the F-22 and its replacement with deeply modernized F-15X Generation 4++ fighters. Meanwhile, the F-15X is only undergoing test trials as of November 1, 2023. Fifth-generation fighters proved too capricious for real combat use. So back in 2020, the Pentagon was forced to postpone full-scale production of the F-35 due to the fighter's unpreparedness to pass combat simulation tests that were supposed to take place back in 2017. In 2021, for the first time, a critical problem was officially announced that made it impossible for the F-35 to operate as a normal fighter in any way, despite the fact that by that time almost 1,000 of these models had been produced for the US and its allies. Since pilot production of the fighter began in 2006, 941 critical defects have been identified, and Lockheed Martin has taken it upon itself to fix all defects and deficiencies in time for full-scale production. In the end, only 99 defects were corrected in 15 years. For example, here's what the Western press says. For 2020, only 2 defects have been remedied. Lockheed had previously said that none of the flaws jeopardized flight safety. However, Laura Seal, a spokeswoman for the U.S. Department of Defense's F-35 program office, declined any comment until the critical flaws report was officially released. It turns out that 10 of the 871 unresolved deficiencies fall into the first category and are insurmountable critical deficiencies that could jeopardize the safety of the pilot or aircraft. So it turns out that the US is forced to buy a modernized F-15 because of the discontinuation of F-22 production, as well as the postponement of the F-35. Moreover, in 2022, the Pentagon at the last moment refused to scrap 33 F-22 Raptor fighter jets, leaving them in the fleet in service, even though congressmen insisted that these fighters are non-fighting and useless for the U.S. Air Force and require nearly $2 billion for their maintenance. That's what the Western press is talking about. The F-22 was going to be decommissioned along with the A-10 attack aircraft, which began service in 1977. As a result, Russia's fifth-generation Su-57 fighter, whose serial production began only in 2019 and operation in 2022, already has impressive combat experience. The Su-57 began immediately performing combat missions such as engaging air targets, suppressing air defense and bombing ground fortifications. The Su-57 was also the first fifth-generation fighter to take part in real military operations with real threats from modern air defense and enemy aircraft. Yes, the F-22 has formally participated in combat operations in Syria and Afghanistan, but there were no air defenses, aircraft, or generally any threats there that could pose a danger to the F-22. By the way, this has all been recognized by reputable Western military equipment magazines as well. The Su-57 was tested in Syria, practicing cruise missile launches against enemy ground fortifications. However, this was more of a test and development of the fighter's main systems before its launch into production, rather than an actual combat operation. The Su-57, unlike the F-22, is capable of using cruise missiles located in the internal compartment and is their regular carrier. Here's the launch of the Kh-59 Mk2 cruise missile from the Su-57. This is a combat test in Syria in 2018. Initially, Western experts believed that the Su-57 aircraft strike without leaving Russian airspace, thus remaining safe and relatively invulnerable to the enemy's combat systems. However, footage was later published showing the Su-57 tearing up ground fortifications behind enemy lines, clearly confirming its combat use outside Russia's borders. And against the backdrop of all this, the Russian Ministry of Defense officially remained silent. It was only after clips with silhouettes of Su-57s in the combat zone began to appear online, and experts began to talk about their use, citing high-ranking officials, that the head of the Russian Defense Ministry, Shoigu, said, "We can answer briefly, yes, we have, we can be a bit broader, we have used and are using the Su-57 aircraft." In general, only at the end of August 2022 there were official comments from the Ministry of Defense on the combat use of the Su-57. For some reason, ours are shy to talk about it, although when the F-22 flew its first ever combat sortie in 2014, all the Western media covered the moment, of course praising the power of the American weapon. And here quite recently it turned out that 4 Su-57 fighters were used at once, which suppressed all Western guidance and air defense systems, fulfilling their intended targets without being detected. And this is against the background of the fact that certain so-called experts have been proving to everyone that the Su-57 is a fiction and does not exist. There are quite a few videos like this on the net right now. Successful combat applications of the Su-57, especially against the background of the Americans' problems with the F-22 and F-35, could make a good advertisement for the Russian fighter, but for some reason they are trying not to publicize it. Despite the fact that, according to Western experts, the Su-57 has already made more than 50 combat sorties. At the same time, none of the air defense stations, including those of Western design, were able to detect these aircraft. This state of affairs becomes a reason for some experts in quotes to doubt. No, not in the air defense systems of the West, namely in the reality of the use of the Su-57, for it is not visible on radars, and this, according to the same experts in quotation marks, cannot be. And the same experts admit that the air defense systems of NATO countries simply missed the old Soviet Tu-141 drone, which flew 3 NATO countries off course and crashed in Croatia. Then a drone fell from the sky into a field near a student dormitory in Croatia, damaging about 40 cars in the process. These experts, of course, tried to justify the lack of any reaction of NATO air defenses, but they could not explain how a combat drone manufactured in 1985, almost 15 meters long and weighing 6 tons, unnoticeably crossed the airspace of Romania, Hungary and Croatia itself. And although the Defense Ministry is not sensationalizing the use of the Su-57 fifth-generation fighter, potential customers are monitoring such information and drawing conclusions. Thus, at the Dubai Airshow 2023 International Airshow, contracts worth $22 billion were signed for the supply of Russian combat and military transport aircraft to 14 countries. The contract is worth $13 billion. There are 18 countries with attack helicopters. The contract is worth $5 billion, and $4 billion worth of aircraft engines to 14 countries. And just a week before the results were summarized, some media and channels wrote about the complete failure of Russia at the Dubai Airshow, obviously, deliberately forgetting that in 2023 Rosoboronexport Export signed contracts worth $4.5 billion before participating in Dubai Airshow 2023. Here's an example of such an article, and the source of such a duck is the Bulgarian edition, Fakti, which concluded about the complete failure of Russia at the exhibition in Dubai, only on the basis of the fact that the Russians did not boast here and now signed contracts. However, then it turned out that in total Rosoboronexport Export is already loaded with foreign contracts for more than $50 billion. Taking into account that Dubai Airshow 2023 became a record-breaking one in terms of the total amount of concluded contracts of $101 billion, including civil aviation, Russian positions here look triumphant. As for the Su-57, Algeria has already contracted 14 of these fighters and another 14 Su-34 bombers. The contract is valued at $6 billion. It looks like the current Su-57 production capacity is 100% occupied. For in the period up to and including 2027 it is necessary to ensure the delivery of 90 more fighters, 76 of which for the Russian Air Force. Yes, of course, the history of the Su-57's creation and formation is quite complex and nuanced, but so far no fifth-generation fighter, including China's G-20, has been able to become a full-fledged replacement for the fourth-generation fighter. And at one time, fourth-generation fighter jets permanently sent third-generation fighters to the eternal parking lot. And here the Su-57 has every chance of becoming the first fighter to replace its fourth-generation forebears. For it already has combat experience, and most importantly it has a fifth-generation engine, which has fully completed all tests and sent to mass production. It was even given the official name AL-51F1, aka Type 30, aka Product 30. It is also the engine for the C-70 Hunter heavy strike drone. The AL-51F1 will be the first true fifth-generation engine, for a similarly fuel-efficient XA-100GE-100 engine will appear next year. With the F-35 not until 2027 at the earliest. It looks like the XA-100GE-100 can be forgotten about though. Alright, let's go. Here's a headline in the American press. The Air Force will not develop a new engine before the F-35, keeping the Pred as the sole contractor.